It's a great opportunity to be talking to you, Trent, today. Could you please introduce yourself and what do you do for business?
Sure. My name is Trent Sullivan. I am a scientist for the USDA in Beltsville, Maryland, but I also run two side businesses. One, a tutoring company called tabstutor.com, and the other, a landscaping company called whatlawn.com. They're run in part by myself and my co founder, Juan, who wasn't able to make this call today. As a scientist at the USDA, I do things like literature reviews, going through old manuscripts, making sure that once there's a topic or issue of interest, and making recommendations based on those topics of interest. And I also do some lab work as well with some microparasites in pork products. For the tutoring business, I do one-on-one and group tutoring for senior citizens, K through 12 students, and young adults learning life skills like how to bank or how to find insurance. For whatlong.com, I also do landscaping, so things like cutting grass, weed whacking, composting, laying mulch, all a whole range of services. Um, and so they both started because of COVID or around the same time as COVID. Tabs Tutor when I was let go from my job as a laboratory technician, and Whatlawn in the midst of COVID. I figured there were a lot of people, a lot of families who needed help with landscaping and that kind of stuff, but for whatever reason couldn't take care of it themselves. So I kind of wanted to step in and help out in that way. So.
Yeah. How did you come up with the idea like to use COVID-19 in a positive way, not in a negative way?
Well, I think a lot of companies do that, but as far as me, it's to use it in a positive way. There's a need, and I know I can fulfill that need. I'm just like to help people. I want to make a profit too, but I mean, let's be real. There are a lot of people out there who are struggling, who are like widows or women who aren't necessarily married, or people just in general for whatever reason who may not have a nephew or somebody close by to say, hey, take care of this thing for me because I don't want to go outside because of whatever health issue. And so I feel it's my duty, or dare say even my vocation, to say, let me step in for you and provide this service. As far as landscaping, tutoring is the same thing, but the tutoring business started before COVID. But essentially, what I try to do with tutoring is say, listen, there's skills that people want to learn so they can live their best lives. And so my job as a tutor is to take what you know and bridge it to what you want to know. And so I really just want to help people go from having a need and then fulfilling it, whether that's through tutoring, landscaping, that kind of stuff.
Does your business come from the background that you have knowledge, or does it come from the idea that you like to help people and jump onto the opportunities?
It's actually a little bit of both. So I have had training with landscaping with my recently late mother. She taught me a lot about taking care of stuff. So how to cut grass, how to weed whack, how to do some light gardening. She had actually, when she had passed, she had left me a very lovely hydrangea bush in the front yard that I try and take care of. So I know there's a need, but I also want to, have prior experience. Same with tutoring. Ever since I graduated high school, I've always been a tutor in some capacity, whether it's for summer programs, whether it's for one-on-one, just like under the table type stuff, or sometimes it just falls right into my lap. And so I figure, I have somewhat of a gift. I don't have education courses under my belt, but I do have a lot of the work experience, a lot of the hands-on experience. So I wanted to parlay that into a business as well.
So as it seems you have like a good experience with businesses, with starting your own kind of business or work. Like how easy or how challenging or what are the main requirements to jump into this kind of business?
Well, there's a lot of requirements, and it's a mixture of both easy and hard. What's easy is starting because there are so many resources. If you have an online internet connection, you could essentially Google everything you need to start a business. That's the easy part. The medium part, I'd say, would be fundraising. So, you don't want to go into debt over a business which isn't profitable. So that's something to consider. But for whatever reason, for better or worse, because of COVID, I was able to get 2 grants for my businesses, and I'm grateful for them. And that helped me kind of get some um, things started with that. The hardest thing I can say with 100% certainty is finding good employees and figuring out what to do. Because sometimes when finding good employees, people want to get paid. That's not a question, but there's oftentimes people don't want to necessarily do the work to get paid. Or even with starting your own business, when you have a boss, they can be kind of mean sometimes, but they at least tell you what to do. Whereas when you're on your own boss, it's kind of weird because it's like, I'm looking for insight, but then you have to like realize, hey, you're the one in charge of this. So you have to stand up, be brave, be bold, and make a decision. And sometimes it's difficult, but it's worth the investment and it's starting to pay off. But I will say those are the easy, medium, hard things about running a business.
How do you target your customers? How do you pick them? And how do you get to them?
How do I pick them and how do I get to them? It's a mixture of there's many methods. So sometimes it's online advertising, sometimes it's references. So sometimes just it comes up organically in conversation. A friend of mine or an associate or somebody, I hate to say it, but off the street will say, "Hey, my kid's having trouble with this academic subject. Hey, there's a lady at the church who needs help with her yardscaping." And so there really is no limit. The limit really is your imagination and how hard you're willing to work. So sometimes that might be via internet, via Facebook, via LinkedIn. Other times it might be in person or things like this where I'm talking to you. It just varies from um, opportunity to opportunity, but it's always open. There's many opportunities, as many as you're bold and brave enough to really take up on. You know.
So as I can say, see that you have one leg in business and one leg in education, like being a tutor and being a businessman. What would you like to bring from the business world to the education world, and what would you take from education to the business world?
Well, that's a very good question. So, from the business world to the education world, I would say student priorities. A lot of the times when you run a business, there's stuff you have to do, but you're given a lot of freedom and leeway on how to do it. Like, for instance, you might have to figure out how to reach clients, but in the business world, but nobody will really tell you if you're your own boss. And I wish I could bring that to education where it's like a student can, given a task to learn or to grow or develop a certain um, topic, but they're given kind of the space to say, hey, I want to learn it this way or I want to apply it that way. That's what I would bring from business to education. From education to business, it's basic stuff. So I know a lot of kids in school will complain about how school doesn't prepare them for the real world. Like there are a lot of people with masters and PhDs who barely know how to do their taxes, who couldn't tell what a lease or a rent or a mortgage is. There are graduate students, myself included, who are like, I don't want to take certain financial endeavors, not because I can't, but I just don't know how, or I just don't want to. And it's very scary. It's a very scary environment. And oftentimes people will be so scared that they pay more. So that's what I want to bring. So for education to business, just making sure that they're aware of certain options they can take as far as finances are concerned. And from business to education, the space to kind of achieve the same goals, but giving students kind of the space to kind of learn it in their own fashion.
So about you as a person in the education world, like how do you project yourself? How do you use what are your techniques? What are your tools? How do you build your career as an educator?
What are my tools, techniques, and how do I build my career as an educator? So some tools, I think the first tool before you do anything else, and I had to learn this kind of the hard way, you have to build a connection to your students. Like if you go in there saying, I'm your teacher, do what I say. Some of them might agree, but the vast majority of them will see you as who the heck is this? Um, so one of the things you have to do straight up is just be like, hey, listen, you're my student. Let's build a connection. Because some people can go in there and be Mr. Mean. I'm not that kind of person. I'm more of a build a relationship. And once you build that relationship, the rigor, the hard work, all of that stuff will come. So that's what you got to do. As far as building my career in education, you just got to put yourself out there. High school, I was exposed to a lot of great tutors through my Upward Bound program in College Park. They taught me the importance of having a teacher, but not only having a teacher, but also having a tutor in the classroom who can see the classroom material and help the teacher out. And so I was intrigued by that model of education where you have a main teacher for subject matter and a TA for more personal matters. I think every school, not even just the collegiate level, every school should have that. And so I was intrigued by that. I embraced it so much that I feel like I'm the best TA. I'll say always a TA, never a teacher in that respect. So that's how I kind of built my brand and education.
What about the business world? How do you build your image?
It's tricky because it's tricky. I will say I had a bit of a slight advantage because in my high school, I was part of my school's Academy of Finance program where they teach you things like how to be an accountant. So, how to do your debits and credits, how to manage a credit card, how to budget, um, things you can consider as far as, you know, finances. Um, Other educational sources, my parents, even if they didn't necessarily know how, they always drilled it in my head the importance of knowing how to be financially aware, be financially stable. And even in the masters, there are a lot of people who are financially stable, who come from backgrounds who are wealthy, and whether it's in class or even just shooting the talk, it's more of a matter of, hey, I'm learning this from you. So it's really a mixture of classroom, working with others in my family that I've kind of learned some business stuff.
So you mentioned in the education world that relationships or rapport with the students is so important. How important is relationship or rapport with your customers in the business world?
Relationships can be everything, but you also have to be careful. Um, Whatlong was actually started because of a relationship I had back in the 90s with one of my neighbors. My neighbor, Juan, was the co founder, and he had an idea, and he's the idea guy. So he says, I have an idea. And so I would contribute back saying, great, this is how we can take our idea and make it into a viable product and service. You know, and as far as the business world is concerned, building a rapport, good business can come from everywhere. You just have to be kind of aware of where it's coming from. Like, for instance, I had a cousin who I was supposed to do a job for a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, she has some concerns. And, most people would say, oh, that's just family. She's not, doesn't know what she's talking about. But when I really listened to her and what she was saying, I learned skills and traits that would be more applicable to business. So, it's everywhere as far as relationships are concerned. You can find business skills anywhere you live, anywhere you work. It's just a matter of saying these are skills, recognizing them, and then acting on them. So you'll
What,
find them essentially anywhere.
so what kind of mentality or what kind of mindset you as a person have? Like you teach in the education world, you run your own businesses, and you are let's say trying to get new ideas, like getting this kind of business at the beginning of COVID-19. How to build this kind of mindset? How to be able to generate new business and generate new ideas?
Uh, I think it's about, again, relationships and peoples. Like, I know a lot of scientists, a lot of people from all fields who have great ideas, but may not, you have to be very well rounded. Like, for instance, when you run your own business, you can't just be the guy who comes in and punches out. Like, you have to kind of, I hate to say it, blur the lines between, your life and the business life. Um, as far as that's concerned. But I think, ooh, that's actually a really good question.
Yeah, like how to be able to maintain this positive mindset, because many people like don't have this kind of this position, don't have this attitude.
Oh, I get what you're saying. It's like the mindset.
Yeah.
I think everybody, in essence, has the mindset. It's just, I don't know how to describe this. As far
Yes.
as mindsets are concerned, I don't think it's a mindset. Anybody can be a business person, anybody. But I will say what's worked for me will be being coachable. So if you don't know something, knowing where to look or being aware of stuff you should know. Like for instance, social media marketing, I know Bupkis, but I will gladly humble myself and say to somebody who may be a bit more knowledgeable, can you help me? Reaching out for help. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I've asked for help and have gotten it. You know, if people see that you're kind of not saying low or inferior, but if people see you're kind of humble, 9 times out of 10, they will bend over backwards to help. And so I think being humble, being coachable, but also being able to say, even if somebody else's business has failed, even if there might be somebody who might be on paper a bit more experienced, being bold enough to say they may have their advantages, but I'm bold enough to at least show up. And even if you aren't accepted into certain fields or certain areas where you like to, the fact that you are even there to be considered is already 3/5 of the way there. So just being coachable, asking the right questions, and being just kind of willing to put yourself out there, put your heart on the line, I think are really successful business traits.
So let's get to the lab work. What has your experience been like? What have you gained out of this work?
I have gained a great sense of work ethic. Working in a lab, especially, well, not especially, in all labs, it's a test of work ethic. So there's never any idle time. Well, there is, but there isn't. But you do learn the sense of working hard, I will say. Like for instance, I worked at a greenhouse for a couple of months during my senior year, and I had to be up at 6, work until like 4 or 5. Pulling weeds, watering plants, digging trenches. So it's hard work. Or even in the molecular biology lab, there'd be times where I'd be, preparing a sample and it wouldn't work, so I'm going to test it again and again and again. Or when you're making a poster, it's just like you have to work with a bunch of other people. So trying to get their schedules together, trying to get their things together, trying to delegate. So working in a lab, you wear, again, many hats, and it builds your work ethic. That's something I've always gotten out of the lab.
Like you mentioned, being coachable, following the work ethics, being humble. Don't you think that these are difficult traits or difficult attributes for most people to follow?
I I don't know how to answer that, but I will say they can be for some people, but I think um, they can be difficult for some people. I'm not gonna lie, but I think at the end of the day, if you want it bad enough, you will. I'm not saying you're gonna be Mr. Expert all of a sudden, but if you want it, then I think you'll bend. You'll move forward with it. But of course, it's hard. Nothing in life is easy.
Okay,
Nothing.
that's fantastic. So, what does biology do in the 21st century?
It does a lot. The 21st century, well, it just started about 20 years ago. A lot of things. So you can take DNA right now from a child, sequence it, and eventually it'll get to a point where it's like, based on this child's DNA, they'll have a predisposition for this amount of disease, or they may be this tall. Biology in the 21st century brings a lot of ethical dilemmas too, because when you can't alter DNA, you can alter human DNA, which means, you know, do people have a right to alter a human embryo to have certain traits or not have certain traits? Or do we screen, embryos for certain traits and then stop the embryo? So there's a lot of progress as far as technology. We are getting to the point where we're going to be like the Jetsons almost, or X-Men. But I think what's really more telling is ethically, how do we make progress, but also um, do the right thing as far as those involved and as far as society is concerned. So the technology is starting to get there where it'll start blowing up hugely, but I think there are a lot of ethical dilemmas where it's kind of like, should we, shouldn't we? Because the technology is getting there, but the ethical dilemmas I think are really key in, you know, determining where biology will go in the 21st century and beyond.
Yeah. Let's go to agriculture in the USA. What are the main strengths of this sector?
I beg your pardon?
Agriculture.
What are the main
Strengths, positives.
strengths in America? There's a lot of strengths. Um, let's see, strengths. I will say, at least in my area, availability. It's a lot of availability because I live in the Metro DC area, so there's a whole USDA campus right next to me. So there's a lot of testing done. The work that I do, um, a lot of it is just kind of commensurate with funding. A lot of it, you have funding. Um, but as far as the advantages, to be honest, I can't really pick any out, quite frankly, that the rest of the world doesn't have. But I can tell you more disadvantages than I can advantages, if that makes sense. Because I mean,
Yeah.
we do fine, but there's a lot more I think we can kind of nitpick. As far as nitpicking, worldwide unity. Like America gets a lot of food from international places, and that's just the nature of the beast. We're a more globalized economy now. But what really kind of, and I'm saying this, let me make myself very clear. I'm not saying this as a government employee, but one of the things that kind of gets me kind of weird is that there's no international standards. Like you have food being exported and imported all around the world. And it seems like in the literature, the academic literature that you can go on PubMed.com, PubMed and read up on, a lot of the times America has kind of been lax on adopting worldwide standards, or embracing a worldwide standard. And I think that's actually a huge disadvantage that we have in comparison to everybody else. Or even the fact, like with COVID, it's a lot of a political issue. So you'll have people say, I don't want this test to be done because you want to protect rights. And yes, rights are good, but then, there's science. Like there was a case where growers were exempted from practicing certain health, I don't know the word, health precautions and for the sake of rights. And then all of a sudden there's a disease breakout. Whereas if they kind of said, you know what, I know you have rights, but the science says we gotta stop this, so it's kind of like a worldwide standard where everybody's in accord with one another on a global scale, but also making sure that science and people's lives aren't made into a political issue, because when it does, it's just not a good deal. And I'm saying that as Trent, not as a government employee, as Trent.
If we come to the international stage, what kind of cooperation or what kind of projects can help develop agricultural cooperation and development on both sides of the ocean, as some people would say?
Oh, that's good. Um, that's kind of tricky, but I will say you have to put science first. A lot like there was a study I was reading in Vietnam where the people have regional foods that are unique to them that are prepared a certain way, but because political issues, it wasn't necessarily prepared in the most hygienic way. So I think it's a very it's like a balancing act. On the one hand, you want to have scientific standards set in stone. On the one hand, you want to have scientific standards set in stone, but I think to say it, but it's a political issue because we have standards that we know work, but it's also a matter of, what's to say that one country will say, screw the rest of the world, this is how we operate, this is how the rest of the world should operate. So I guess what I'm trying to say is finding a balance between actual hard science, but also making sure that it's applied evenly and equitably amongst all participants. Because you want to have science, but you also want to have, you know, equality and making sure that everybody's voice is heard.
From your experience, you have knowledge or you have experience in the education world, you have experience in the business world, you have experience with agriculture and biology. How can this be put together to, let's say, get like-minded people from all over the world and then develop or try to improve these nations? How is that possible?
How is that possible? I think a good way to start is getting the funding available and a funding in some type of I hate to say like a UN, but I think it may be a private sector issue, where it's like you get a company that maybe want to be at the cutting edge or avant-garde, but also benevolent because you don't want the wrong company doing it for profits and then screwing things up. So I think if you had a financial backing and involvement from all stakeholders involved and maybe have one, whether it's political or um, industry, whatever, like one person just being bold enough to say, I'm putting forth the money, it would probably draw people in. I think it just takes, one person to say, or one organization to say, we want to get this done. We're putting money behind it. And I think it would, from there, attract those who would be willing to help and who will be passionate about it. But I think it takes somebody to kind of speak up and have money to back it up, essentially.
What else would you like to say?
Not much. I think I've kind of said enough for today, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And shameless plug, I'm hiring tutors. I'm hiring for administrative staff. Feel free to visit me at tabs tutor or whatlawn.com. My email address is Trent at tabstutor.com or Trent at whatlawn.com. Feel free to shoot me a message. I'd love to have continue this conversation and build and grow with you. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.